Drinking water problems such as lead contamination affect numerous cities throughout the country, Flint, Michigan being the most notable. So how does Springfield avoid the issues that plague other cities in the nation? I sat down with Jaimye Bartak of the Springfield Water and Sewer Commission to talk about what the city of Springfield does to combat lead contamination in their water.
In terms of lead contamination in Springfield, I think at least in the past 10 years, we've had no issues with lead contamination. And in terms of the schools, the Springfield Water Sewer Commission has assisted the city of Springfield's public schools in recent rounds of sampling for lead within their own buildings, such as testing for lead at various fixtures and things like that. But there have been no major issues, although there have been some high hits within the schools. In terms of our water system, the Springfield Water and Sewers, pipes and things like that, there have been no issues.
And what do you attribute that to? Springfield doesn't have lead-lined pipes anymore, is that correct?
That's correct. So there's kind of three big factors that are really big positives for Springfield in terms of lead contamination. First, as you mentioned, there are no known lead service lines in place in Springfield anymore. And that's because back in the 1980s and 1990s, the city of Springfield had the foresight to see the potential risks that to health that lead present. So they worked on locating and removing and replacing all known lead service lines. And that effort was completed in 2005 or 2006. So we can say that today there are no lead service lines in place. Another factor is that we have a stable water supply. So everyone hears about what happened in Flint, and that was triggered by them changing their source of water. They went from Detroit to the Flint River. And every single water supply source has a different chemistry. But here in Springfield, we have Cobble Mountain Reservoir, which is located in Blandford and Granville. And we have no intention of changing that. It's served us very well since the 1930s. And in addition to that, when that reservoir was developed, city forefathers took the care to start preserving land that surrounded the reservoir. And that continues to this day. And that maintains a stable water quality and chemistry in the water. And the third factor is that Flint, as another, again, going back to that example, wasn't employing a corrosion control treatment program, which are very common, particularly for older cities which might have a lot of lead within their pipes or in old buildings. And the Springfield Water and Sewer Commission has been implementing a corrosion control program for decades. And that is basically a treatment of the water. We add phosphate to the water to protect lead pipes from leaching lead into the water.
And what are some of the effects of excessive consumption or exposure to lead through water?
Well, in general, it's a neurotoxin, and so that's why we at the Commission take it very, very seriously. It can cause developmental delays and intellectual delays and a whole host of other health effects.
Governor Baker has recently set aside $30 million in his proposed state budget for water testing in schools. Do you think there's a need for water testing in schools in Western Mass specifically?
Oh, sure. And the reason for that is because there's still lead that's, even if it's not in our pipes in the streets or even in the lead service lines anymore, lead can still be found in internal plumbing and plumbing fixtures and solder in buildings. It was used for many years in those materials. It's not allowed anymore, but it's still out there. That's why we continue to employ a corrosion control treatment program, but it's not necessarily foolproof. And the issue with schools in particular is they have a unique situation because they might be using a lot of water during the day, but then the water might sit there over a long holiday or a vacation. And it's that water stagnation, when water's been sitting there, that is the most, that offers the most potential introduction of lead into the drinking water supply. So we definitely support testing in schools, and we also advocate to our customers to flush their pipes every morning when they wake up and every night if you don't know what's in your walls. I myself live in a house that was built in 1925, so when I wake up in the morning, before I fill up my coffee maker, I let the water run for 30 seconds to a minute. And likewise, when I get home from work, before I fill up my pot for spaghetti, I'm making sure I'm flushing those pipes and keeping that water fresh.
And to be clear, the Springfield Water and Sewer Commission isn't necessarily responsible for the Springfield Public Schools water service, but you do offer guidance. And
correct, yes. The last round when the Springfield Public Schools went through this, we offered guidance on how to collect the samples and then any remediation efforts, such as flushing or replacing the plumbing or the fixtures. But that's correct. We don't own the plumbing within the building. We also don't own the service lines coming from the mains to the street. So the testing is really all going to happen under the Springfield Public Schools. But of course, we're here to offer assistance.
And do you know the current state of Springfield school systems drinking water?
I think in general, it's been fairly positive. They have made a lot of headway in terms of replacing fixtures as they needed to. But again, the lead was introduced into the systems, for many decades. So it's always good to keep vigilant about that. As
you noted earlier in some of your remarks, Flint, Michigan has received a lot of attention because of their water issues. A lot of these cities that have been affected by water concerns, like Flint, are low-income and predominantly marginalized communities. How does Springfield manage access to clean drinking water for populations that are sometimes overlooked?
Well, in terms of providing clean drinking water at affordable rates, that's something that's a top priority at the Commission. And we do that particularly through a lot of financial planning and a lot of project planning. We have an old system. Everyone knows that. We have old infrastructure. There's a lot of upgrades that need to be made. But we know that because of the affordability issues, and because there is not a lot of, or really any federal or state money or grants to support upgrades and things like that, we make sure that we plan out our projects and sequence them in a way that means that any rate increases that happen are incremental and manageable. It's really important that we keep rates affordable because drinking water is so critical to everyday life.
Both Flint and Springfield were sort of blue-collar communities with heavy industry that left at some point, and both cities sort of took a bit of an economic downturn. Flint, I think, much more so than Springfield. With these things in common, do you have an answer as to why Springfield was sort of able to handle their water in a much better fashion than Flint was?
Well, Flint did have a good water supply through the city of Detroit. I believe they were getting their water from there. And from what I've read about the case there, it seems like they made some pretty hasty decisions in order to save money on an emergency basis. Our water supply was built for when Springfield was about to boom and was expected to become much bigger than it has. And we have a great watershed and a great water supply. We're in many ways just very fortunate in terms of history has treated us well, and we have such a stable supply, and it's so well protected that we don't have to make those decisions. We also were, back when the system was built, predominantly in the first 3 decades of the 20th century, we were working with the same engineers that were building Boston and Hartford's water system supplies. So we just have a really well-designed system that has really stood the test of time. However, of course, that time has come to start making some new investments so it's available for the next generations. We've been very fortunate, and we've also been the Commission itself has been very vigilant over the past several decades to make sure that we start making those critical investments, because if we don't ever want to find ourselves in a position like Flint.